Hi, my name is Bekah Legg, and I'm the CEO of a Christian organisation called Restored. And we have a mission to speak up about violence against women and girls, to equip the church to stand against domestic abuse in particular as the form of violence that most women are most likely to experience, and to support survivors. And that means a whole number of things. So we have an online community of over 750 women now, who have all been subjected to domestic abuse and who are at various stages of recovery, which is worth knowing if you ever need to signpost somebody to us. But when it comes to thinking about justice and joy and gender-based violence, sometimes it's a little bit hard to find either. But I do have wonderful stories of justice, and I do have some absolutely joyful stories too. But the justice sits at the heart of this, really, because I got really propelled into doing the work that I do by my study of this story that we find in Judges 19. Now, it's an obscure story that most of us haven't ever preached on, probably, but it's the story of the Levite and his concubine, and we're probably aware of it. And it's a story of a woman who is submitted to just gross injustice from the start to the end. But at the end, God's people come together in the marketplace, if you like, and they call out and they say, has such a thing happened in Israel before? And the truth is probably it had. But they're so outraged at what's happened that they demand that we must speak up and we must do something. And that might ring bells from the mission of Restored that I told you about just now. It sits at the heart of everything that we do. And I do see justice because I see this topic becoming more and more talked about within church circles. It's something that used to be totally taboo, something that we didn't even look at, something that we didn't recognise. And increasingly we care. The fact that I get to talk to you just in this little clip means that things are beginning to change. And that is a wonderful thing. We're seeing it on a societal level, but we're also seeing it on a church level. And my passion really is to see the church leading the way, for us to be prophetic voices, calling the church to action in this area where so many women sit and get hurt at the hands of male violence. And I see joy too. You see, 1 in 4 women will be subjected to domestic abuse, and those figures are the same inside the church as outside the church, which is a tragedy. And historically, those women haven't been listened to. Of the 750 odd women that we support, we know that time and time again, women have had to leave church when they sought freedom and that they weren't supported. But that is beginning to change. And I have wonderful stories of women whose lives have been totally transformed. There's one who I shall call Molly. And Molly is somebody that I met 4 years ago now. When I first met her, she was small, all huddled up in a corner of a Zoom screen of a course that I was running at the time. She came in on week 8 of our course, absolutely beaming, which was unusual. And I said, gosh, what's happened to you? And she said, Bekah, I found a church. And in that moment, I had 2 reactions. And one was, yay. And the other was, oh, because I thought, I don't know where you're going. And I said, oh, tell me a little bit more. And she told me about this church that she'd found online. This was in 2021. It was still quite COVID-esque everywhere. And she said, but I thought they'd be safe, Bekah, because they signposted Restored on their website, so I thought they might understand my story, and they did. And that church went on to have an enormous effect on that woman's life. And I met her a couple of years later in person for the first time, and had that moment of going, blimey, you're a lot taller than I imagined. But she was a lot of things that I hadn't imagined, because when I first met her, she really was curled up in a ball, full of fear. But when I met her in person, after she'd had this beautiful church community walk alongside her, be a well-informed friend who helped her to rediscover her life, rediscover her faith, rediscover her value, rediscover all the things that had been taken for her. She stood tall and she stood proud, and she told me about the new job she'd got, where in the past she had been too scared to leave the house. She told me about all the people she supported nowadays. And she said, Bekah, I'm just so busy doing all the things I was never allowed to do before. So there is real joy in this work as well, when we get to see God's kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. And you could be part of that. Now, Restored training should already be available on all of your safeguarding hubs, but there's more. And you can access that. You can access our resources on our website, restored-uk.org. And you can get in touch if you'd like to know how your church could partner with us to be a church just like that church was for Molly, and become what we call restored beacons, churches who choose to stand with survivors and stand against abuse in their communities, and to be a change agent in their society that they work in. So That's my message to you, and I look forward to hearing from you. Have a great rest of your session.